At the recovery ward on the far edge of Saint Varda Combat Institute, Nora Vale woke to the sound of waves striking the steel pylons below her room. The ward hung over the black water of Orris, a cold ocean world where Saint Varda trained cadets for coastal combat and emergency response. Nora understood 4 things within seconds. She was in the medical arm, the medics controlled this section, internal security controlled the rest of the campus, and something had gone wrong after the field drill in Sector West. Her first goals were simple: find out what happened to her team, then get out of the ward and reach anyone who was still alive. The ceiling lights were dimmed to recovery level. Salt still clung to her skin, her ribs hurt, her knee had been wrapped, and her boots were gone from the side of the bed. That last detail bothered her more than the pain. A gray-skinned medic noticed she was awake and came over with a tablet in hand. "Easy," he said. "You took a bad fall in the surf channel. Stay down another few minutes." Nora pushed herself up anyway. "Where's my team?" The medic checked the tablet without meeting her eyes. "They were brought back from the range." "That is not the same as answering me." He gave her a practice calm look, the kind Saint Varda taught to people who had to stop panic before it spread. "We are still processing intake." Nora let the words sit. Saint Varda medics were usually blunt, and if someone was alive, they said alive. If someone was in surgery, they said surgery. They did not talk around a question unless someone had told them to. She looked around the ward instead. For beds, 2 occupied, 1 empty, and 1 with its restraints folded neatly at the side rail. A supply cart stood near the door, and a locked locker wall lined the far side of the room. There were no visitors and no chatter from the hall, even though on drill days the medical arm was never that quiet. The cadet in the next bed lay still with his eyes closed, but his jaw was tight. He was listening. Nora swung her legs down and stood. The medic moved at once, not rough, just fast enough to block her path to the lockers. "I need my boots," she said. "I can bring them." "I did not ask you to." He did not move. That was when the room stopped feeling like a place for recovery. It started feeling like a place meant to hold people until someone else arrived. Nora sat back down without arguing. She watched his hands instead of his face. Calm voice, ready stance, tablet turned inward. He was not afraid she would collapse. He was afraid she would leave. A second medic entered a minute later with a scan wand and a cup of clear fluid. She was human, older, and sharp-eyed. "Nora," she said, "I am Dr. Elian Marr. I need a quick follow-up." The first medic stepped aside. Dr. Marr passed the wand across Nora's ribs, shoulder, and knee while the device hummed softly. Nora did not watch the display. She watched the doctor's expression instead. Most of it stayed neutral. Then Dr. Marr checked 1 line on the readout and paused for half a heartbeat. "There, a break in a mask. What did you see?" Nora asked. Dr. Marr lowered the wand. "You are stable." "That was not my question." "Your recovery rate is faster than expected." Nora held her gaze. "You're not surprised that I woke up. You are surprised I'm standing." Dr. Marr set the wand down. "Drink this." Nora looked at the cup. "What is it?" "Anti-inflammatory support." "No." The first medic stepped closer. "Cadet Vale, do not make this harder." That sentence told her more than the cup did. This was not about comfort. It was about control. The cadet in the next bed opened his eyes at last. He was broad-shouldered, pale, and trying hard not to breathe too deeply. "Do not drink it," he said. The first medic snapped toward him. "Stay out of this." Nora turned. "Your name?" "Jalen," or "Were you on my team?" He shook his head once. "Different lane. Same storm. Same trap." Dr. Marr went still. The first medic said, "Enough." Nora focused on Jalen. "What trap?" Jalen swallowed. The beacon pattern shifted after deployment. The route markers sent teams toward the surf cut instead of inland. Too clean to be weather. Too timed to be an accident. Dr. Marr spoke before Nora could answer. "You are both injured. No one here is fit for speculation." But Nora already had enough to feel the shape of it. A failed route. A quiet ward. Missing boots, careful language, a drug she had not asked for, and medics who seemed more worried about timing than treatment. She turned back to Dr. Marr. "Who are you waiting for?" Neither medic answered. The overhead speakers clicked, then a neutral voice filled the room. Recovery arm access is temporarily restricted. Please remain in assigned medical spaces until notified. Temporary restriction. Saint Varda used plain language when things were normal. That phrase meant lockdown without saying the words out loud. Nora looked at the door. The first medic moved in front of it before she could. Remain seated, he said. A hard knock sounded once from the outer hall. Then the door slid open. 2 officers from internal security stepped into the ward in dark utility armor marked with Saint Varda insignia. They had no stretcher team, no emergency gear, and no sign they had come to help anyone. The taller officer looked straight at Nora. Cadet Nora Vale. You will come with us for debrief and containment review. Containment. Nora kept her voice flat. I was in a field drill, not a biohazard unit. The officer did not react. You were exposed to an uncontrolled variable. That was enough for Nora. He was not here because she broke rules. He was here because she had survived something they had not expected her to survive cleanly. Dr. Marr tried once. She still needs observation. The officer ignored her. Cadet Vale. Move. Nora did not move. She watched his hands instead. No drone weapon. No shock restraints out. That meant they needed her walking, conscious and intact. Useful, not dangerous. Not yet. Jalen spoke from the next bed. Ask him where they took the others. The shorter officer turned toward Jalen too quickly for that to be routine. Nora saw enough in that motion. Internal security was not collecting statements. They were collecting survivors. Nora moved first. She grabbed the metal supply cart and slammed it hard into the taller officer's knees. Bottles burst across the floor. The second officer lunged, but Jalen kicked his bed frame sideways into the man's legs. Dr. Marr swore under her breath and slapped the ward lights into emergency blue. In the confusion, Nora crossed to the locker wall, yanked open the nearest compartment, and found her boots and field jacket. She pulled both on fast, pain burning through her ribs now, but still simple enough to work through. The taller officer was already rising. Seal the room. He snapped into his shoulder transmitter. Dr. Marr reached the side console instead. Her voice had changed, and the calm mask was gone. There is a service corridor behind the supply hatch. It runs under the ward to the north transit spine. If you take the main hall, they will close on you before you reach the lift. Nora looked at her. Why help me? Dr. Marr glanced at the officer, trying to get past the cart. Because to stop being medicine before you woke up. That was enough. Nora ran to the supply hatch. Jalen had gotten halfway out of bed, one hand pressed to his side. Go, he said. Come with me. I slow you down. The second officer reached for him. Dr. Marr stepped in the way, not to win, just to buy time. The first medic shouted at her to move. She did not. Nora pulled the hatch open. Cold air hit her face at once. The corridor beyond was narrow, wet, and loud with wind threading through the support ribs under the ward. Black water flashed through gaps in the outer shielding below. Dr. Marr keyed the hatch lock from inside. North spine, she said. Do not stop. Nora went through. The hatch began to close behind her. For 1 second, she saw Dr. Marr in the shrinking gap, standing between 2 angry officers in a room that no longer belonged to the sick. Then the hatch sealed. Nora ran. The service corridor curved beneath the recovery arm toward the main body of the campus. Steel grating rang under her boots. Every few seconds the sea slammed the pylons below and sent a dull tremor through the walls. Ahead, warning lights began to pulse down the route, section after section, carrying the lockdown deeper into Saint Varda. At the end of the corridor, the campus opened in front of her through a maintenance screen. Tier after tier of buildings climbed over the storm coast, linked by bridges, lift towers, and enclosed transit spines. Whole sections were already going dark as bulk doors sealed by level. She had escaped the ward. Then she saw security shutters dropping across the north spine one segment at a time and understood what that escape really meant. She had not escaped Saint Varda. She had only reached the first hallway of the hunt. Nora had made it out of the recovery ward, but the hard part had only started. Before internal security closed the campus around her, she needed 2 things fast. She needed a way into the older training side of Saint Varda, and she needed proof that someone else from Sector West had made it back alive. The North Transit Spine was the fastest route to both. It was also the first place they would lock. She left the maintenance corridor through a grated hatch beneath the North Bridge. Wind hit her at once, sharp with salt and rain, and the campus opened in layers above the Black Sea. Saint Varda had been built like a fortress stretched over a storm coast. The medical arm stood off to one side on its own supports, while the main training blocks sat deeper inland on heavy concrete terraces. Between them ran enclosed bridges, lift towers, and service catwalks that looked clean in daylight and deadly when the weather turned. The shutters on the North Spine were already coming down segment by segment. Nora did not run for the center of the bridge. She dropped below the main lane and moved along the narrow maintenance lip onto the transit tube, one hand on the wet support rail and boots ringing softly on steel. Through the thick glass above her, she could see cadets frozen in place inside the tube, while security lights flashed red over their heads. An overhead speaker came alive somewhere in the structure above. Campus movement is now restricted by order of internal security. Cadets will report to assigned shelter points and await escort. That made the sides clear enough. The medics had tried to keep her still, and now internal security was sealing the campus to catch whoever slipped through them. Nora kept moving under the bridge because the old training storage sat 3 blocks inland. If anyone from her team had been sorted fast and hidden faster, that was the kind of place they might use before transfer. Ahead, the maintenance lip ended at a junction box the size of a small room. Nora climbed through the side frame and came up inside a service bay beneath the transit spine. A map strip glowed on the wall in simple block text. North Bridge above. Lift tower to the left, storm drain access forward, and storage annex beyond. She took one look at the lift icon and ignored it. Lifts trap people. Stairs slowed them. Storm drains smelled terrible and kept them alive. Nora slipped through the forward hatch just as boots sounded above her. Internal security was splitting into teams now. She could hear them through the overhead decking, moving in pairs and using short bursts of speech with no wasted words. They were not searching blind. They were hurting. The storm drain access was really a concrete service tunnel with a graded floor and runoff streaming along both sides. It ran under the training terraces toward the storage annex. Nora followed it for 40 yards, keeping close to the wall whenever lights passed over the grate above. Twice, she heard security teams cross overhead. Once she caught her own name through the metal. Vale moved off the medical arm before containment. Command wants her intact. That last word stayed with her. Whatever they wanted, they did not want a body. They want a result. At the end of the runoff tunnel, she climbed a service ladder and pushed through a warped panel into the back of the old storage annex. The room smelled of salt, machine oil, and damp canvas. Emergency lamps painted the racks in weak amber bands. Crates marked for storm drills and coastal rescue were stacked to the ceiling, and a roll door on the far side led toward the old range access road. Nora listened before moving farther in. No boots, no security chatter, just rain on the outer panels and one other sound. Breathing. She followed it past a rack of training harnesses and found a man sitting against a crate with one hand pressed hard against his side. His uniform was Saint Varda issue, but not cadet gray. He wore the darker field colors of range support. He had blood on his sleeve, not much, but enough to show he had gotten out in a hurry and stayed out by luck. He saw her and flinched for the door. Nora caught his wrist before he could rise. "If you yell, they get both of us," she said. He froze, then looked up at her face. Recognition hit him a second later. "You were in West Sector. So were you." He nodded once. "Maintenance support. I was on. Beacon checks." That mattered. Nora let go of his wrist, but stayed close enough to stop him if he bolted. "Name?" "Taryn Bell. Are you hiding from internal security or from the storm?" He gave her a tired look. "Does it matter?" "It matters if you are about to waste my time." Taryn drew a breath and lost the fight with the pain halfway through. "I am hiding because they started asking the wrong questions before the weather had even cleared. They did not ask who was hurt first. They asked which teams stayed active longest after the route failure." Nora crouched in front of him. The route failure was planned? Taryn looked toward the door as if he expected it to open any second. Not planned like a bombing. Plan like a test. The beacon net in Sector West is a field guide. It tells cadets where the safe line is, where to retreat, and where the surf channel is too unstable. Tonight it changed after deployment. That only happens if someone with command access rewrites the pattern. Nora kept her voice low. Why? He let out one short laugh without humor. Because somebody wanted to see which teams would adapt after the map stopped helping them. That was plain enough for Nora. The beacon net was not just equipment. In a storm lane, it was the thing that told cadets where the ground would still hold and where the sea would take them. If someone bent that guide on purpose, this had not been a bad drill. It had been a filter. Who knows this? Nora asked. Taryn's answer came fast. Not many. I saw the change request because I serviced the backup relays. I should not have seen it at all. Wrong label. Buried under weather response. Who signed it? I never saw the full chain. Only the local push code. That was frustrating, but it was still more than she had 10 minutes ago. Taryn shifted and grimaced. They are collecting survivors by performance bands. Nora stared at him. Say that again. He swallowed. After the storm cut the lanes apart, command tracked which cadets stayed functional longest. Who kept moving? Who kept making decisions? Who could still carry weight, stay alert, follow retreat logic, and improvise under stress? Internal security is taking those names first. There it was. Not discipline. Not a simple cover-up. The people above them had used a broken field exercise to measure something ugly and useful, then moved fast to pull the survivors off the board before anyone could compare stories. Useful for what? Nora asked. Taryn shook his head. I do not know the final purpose. Only the sorting. The phrase in the relay file was threshold candidates. Nora heard footsteps outside and stood at once. The annex rolled door rattled as rain hammered it. A second later, she heard voices in the outer access lane. Storage annex is next. North team holds the road. South team checks drainage and lifts. Taryn struggled to get up. Nora grabbed his arm and pulled him behind a crate stack just as a narrow beam of light passed under the roll door seam. He whispered, I can still walk. Good. Then do it quietly. Nora led him through the back of the annex and into a side passage that connected old range support rooms to the drainage stairs. She took it because the main road would already be sealed and because anyone hunting in force always checked the clean path first. The side passage was narrow, damp, and cluttered with unused gear cages. It smelled like old rubber and wet concrete. Halfway down, Taryn touched her sleeve and pointed to a wall terminal. The screen was dead except for a single line cycling over and over. Movement classification update pending. Nora glanced at him. That means nothing to me. It means they have not tagged us by final status yet, he whispered. When the list closes, doors start reading the label attached to your file. Medical. Stable. Restricted. Transfer. And if mine changes? Taryn gave her a thin, tired look. Then every locked section on campus stops being just a locked section. That was enough for Nora to understand the direction. A file tag at Saint Varda was like a name written on the wrong side of a cell door. Once it changed, the building started helping hold you. She moved again, faster now. The passage ended at a set of concrete stairs that rose toward the old training mezzanine. Nora took the stairs two at a time and came out into a dark observation corridor overlooking one of the smaller indoor drill courts. The court below was empty except for stacked barriers and a flood of rainwater blowing in through a half-sealed roof panel. Above the court, two internal security teams crossed the opposite balcony and split without slowing. They were closing the campus in sections exactly the way Taryn had feared. Not a panicked search, a shaped one. Nora pulled back from the glass. They are not looking everywhere. No, Taryn said. They are building a funnel that fit what she had heard under the bridge. Teams on the spine, teams on the road, drainage checked, lifts checked. The clean exits had never been exits at all. They were pressure lines meant to force survivors into narrower paths where security could take them intact. A new voice came over the wall speakers, deeper now and closer to command. Attention all containment units. Cadet Vale is believed to be moving inland from the medical arm. Restrict bridge access. Preserve candidate condition. Candidate. Nora closed her eyes for one beat, not from fear, but from anger finally finding a clean shape. She was not being hunted because she ran. She was being hunted because she had made it through the storm in better condition than someone expected, and now some part of Saint Varda wanted to turn that survival into property. Taryn heard the message too. You see it now. I see enough. Below them, one of the security officers looked up, maybe at a sound and maybe at instinct. Nora stepped back from the rail before his beam found the glass. Which way gets us to a clean line out? She asked. Taryn answered right away. There is no clean line out anymore. That was honest, at least. Nora respected honest bad news. Then which way gets us to someone who can name the program? He hesitated. That was answer enough by itself. Nora turned on him. Who? I do not know the whole chain. Who knows more than you? Taryn wiped rain from his face with the back of his hand. Deputy Range Director Sarah Kelm handled the West Sector Override Review last month. I heard her arguing with a security captain in the relay room 2 nights ago. She used the word thresholds. She said command was pushing the lanes too hard. Where is she? I do not know where she is now. Office block maybe. Or already taken. Nora nodded once. New target. New direction. The part of her that had wanted only to get out was losing ground. Now, if she vanished into the sea or the storm that night, Saint Varda would sort the survivors, bury the drill, and do it again. A metallic slam echoed from the stairwell behind them. Taryn went white. They found the annex. Nora moved at once. Then we stopped moving like prey. She led him through a maintenance door onto the outer mezzanine that wrapped the drill court. Wind hit hard enough to shove them sideways. The sea was visible again between buildings, black and violent below the terraces. To the left, a narrow utility bridge connected the mezzanine to the old office block. To the right, the route dropped toward supply yards already crawling with security lights. Boots pounded through the interior corridor behind them. Nora chose left. The utility bridge was open to the weather except for waist-high rails and a line of storm lamps. It was a bad route for hiding and the only route fast enough to matter. Halfway across, the office block doors ahead began to seal. They're closing it, Taryn said. Nora kept running. I noticed. That was the one dry line she allowed herself. They reached the doors just before the panels met. Nora threw her shoulder into the narrowing gap and forced enough space for Taryn to slide through. He stumbled inside. She followed a second later, twisting sideways as the panels slammed shut behind her hard enough to shake the frame. For a moment, the corridor beyond was dark, except for emergency strips low along the walls. Old office suites lined one side, and observation windows looked back toward the court on the other. Rain hammered the glass. Then Taryn made a sound that was not pain, not exactly. Nora turned. He was staring at the terminal by the sealed door. The new line on the screen was short. Threshold candidates identified. He laughed once, weak and bitter. It closed. Nora stepped to the terminal and saw 2 names on the restricted list beneath the line. Nora Vale. Taryn Bell. Before she could say anything, security lights flared red at both ends of the corridor. Magnetic locks slammed home. The ceiling speaker clicked. Remain where you are. Retrieval team en route. Taryn leaned against the wall and shut his eyes. I'm sorry. They were tracking me too. That was the price. The one man who had given Nora her first. Clear layer of truth had led the net straight over both of them, whether he meant to or not. Nora looked from one sealed end of the corridor to the other, then at the names glowing on the terminal. The hunt had changed scale again. This was not a rogue team inside internal security pulling rank for its own reasons. This was a program with labels, sorting rules, and command authority behind it. She had wanted to find survivors and get out. Now she wanted the name above the program, and she was done asking politely. Nora was locked in an office corridor with her name on a restricted list, and staying alive no longer meant running at random. She needed the name above the program, the proof that could break it, and a way to get it both before retrieval teams reached the door. Taryn Bell, pale and shaking beside the terminal, was still the only person who had told her the truth without trying to drug, sort, or contain her. The corridor sat inside the old office block above the indoor drill court. One end led back toward the utility bridge she and Taryn had just crossed, and the other pointed deeper into a line of sealed range offices and a stairwell that security had already locked. Red lights pulsed at both ends. Rain struck the long windows overlooking the court, and somewhere inside the wall's magnetic latches kept tightening down. Nora stepped to the terminal and scanned the display again. Threshold candidates identified. Under it sat two names, Nora Vale and Taryn Bell, with no route menu and no override prompt. There was only the message and a countdown line that had started at 5 minutes. "What happens when it hits 0? She asked. Taryn leaned against the wall and tried not to slide down it. "Retrieval team gets local control. Doors open for them, not us." Nora looked around the corridor again. "Then we do not wait for them." She moved to the nearest office door and checked the frame. Locked. The next one too. The third had old mechanical hinges and a narrow service plate at the base where conduit lines entered the wall. Nora crouched, pulled the plate free with her fingers, and found a maintenance latch behind it. Taryn stared at her. "How did you know that was there?" "I did not." "Old. Buildings keep old habits." She forced the latch sideways. The office door clicked open. Inside, the room was dark except for low power strips under a long desk. A projector wall covered one end, cabinets lined the side, and the place smelled like dust, hot wiring, and neglect. It had not been used for normal administration in a while. That made it more useful, not less. Nora shut the office door behind them and crossed the projector wall. "What was this block used for?" "Old range review," Taryn said. Before Saint Varda moved most of the live analysis into the main command terrace. "Good. Old systems leave traces." She powered the desk by hand using the local switch and got a weak screen alive. The first menu that opened was dead storage, nothing useful at first glance. Roster archives, weather captures, and training snapshots. Then she saw a folder with restricted status, still hanging under local review instead of central transfer. West Sector Response Evaluation. Not accident review. Not storm failure report. Response evaluation. Nora opened it. The first file was a simple chart, almost insultingly simple. Names on one side and time bands on the other. Mobility under environmental disruption. Decision retention under pain. Load carry after impact. Team cohesion after route collapse. Each row ended with a color bar. Nora did not need the rest explained. It was not medicine, and it was not rescue. It was a butcher's list dressed up as analytics. Taryn came closer, breathing tight through his teeth. "That is it." Nora opened the next file. A short note, not even signed in full. West Sector phase approved for elevated uncertainty injection. Candidate extraction authorized after threshold confirmation. There was in plain language. Someone at Saint Varda had taken a training lane, warped it on purpose, watched which cadets kept functioning after the safe guide failed, and marked the strongest survivors for extraction. A third file finally showed why they were moving so fast. Special response doctrine required live candidates before transfer window closure at dawn. No extension recommended. Storm cycle useful for concealment. Nora read it once, then again. That was enough for her to understand what mattered. A transfer window was a pickup slot. Miss it, and whoever was waiting on the other end did not arrive on time. The storm was useful because it hid chaos, blurred witness accounts, and let command call almost anything a weather loss. That was why they were rushing. Taryn let out a bitter breath. "They're shopping." Nora did not answer right away. She still did not know who the buyer was, but she knew the shape now. This program wanted people who could take pain, confusion, broken routes, and collapsing chain of command without freezing. Not to reward them, to use them. Another file opened under the doctrine note. It showed a clipped image of a human silhouette carrying a downed teammate through surf and debris while a clock ran beside it. Under the image sat one line. Disposable forward response units reduce political cost. Nora's face hardened. "There." Taryn looked over her shoulder and went quiet. The phrase said enough by itself. These were not elite rescue teams. These were people pushed ahead into impossible ground, so someone higher up could save ships, officers, or budgets. If they lived, good. If they did not, the mission still moved. The speakers in the corridor crackled outside the office door. Candidate corridor remained sealed. Command requests behavioral response under restricted exit conditions. Nora stared toward the door. Tarrant heard it too. They know we are in here. They knew the moment the list closed. He looked from the dark room to the blocked corridor outside. Then this office is part of it too. Nora nodded slowly. Yes, we are not hiding inside the building. The building is guiding us. She pulled the storage drive from the desk and slipped it into her jacket. Then she killed the office screen and crossed to the inner maintenance hatch behind the projector wall. The office block had once connected to the old simulation wing through service lines used by instructors. If the hatch still opened, it might give them a path deeper inside, somewhere retrieval teams would not expect them to go first. The hatch did open, though only after Nora jammed the release with the metal edge of the terminal plate she had pocketed from the corridor. A narrow utility passage lay beyond it, dusty but powered, sloping down toward the old simulation level. Tarrant caught the frame as he stepped through. You're going deeper. Yes, that is where they want you. Probably. He frowned. Then why help them? Nora shut the hatch behind them. Because wanting me deeper and controlling what I find are not the same thing. That was the difference she had finally accepted. She was being pushed, but she did not have to stay blind while she moved. If the trap ran through the old simulation wing, then the design lived there too. The person who built it would have left fingerprints somewhere. The utility passage fed them into a dark catwalk above an abandoned simulation chamber. The room below was huge, ringed with broken projectors and old impact panels. It had once been used to run teams through urban rescue drills, ship breach scenarios, and panic control exercises. Tonight, it was lit again in scattered sections. Portable field lamps stood around the floor. Cables ran where old systems had been patched into new equipment. Saint Varda had called it abandoned. Someone had been busy in it recently. Nora crouched at the catwalk rail and looked down. 4 restraint chairs stood on the simulation floor. None were empty. 2 held cadets from other species. 1 held a human she did not know. The 4th sat turned away from her. When the prisoner moved and the field lamp caught the side of a familiar face, Nora felt the blow land deep. Jalen Orr, the cadet from the recovery ward, lifted his head as if he had sensed movement above him, but the angle was wrong. He could not see the catwalk. A medic was checking a line at his chair while 2 security officers waited near the chamber door. At the far end of the floor, a projection wall displayed a shifting route map of West Sector with survival bands marked in yellow and red. Tarrant whispered, "They brought candidates here before transfer." Nora kept her voice low. "How many teams?" "I do not know." She studied the room. No easy path in, 2 guards on the floor, 1 medic, 1 overhead access ladder on the far side, an exit door reinforced, and a projection wall running live from some control hub deeper inside the old wing. Then a new voice came through the chamber speakers. Calm, educated, and carrying none of the strain of a field officer. Begin stage stress sequence for Group 2. Keep Vale in motion if she is still mobile. I want adaptive choice under narrowing options. Nora went still. She did not know the speaker's full name yet, but she knew enough about the mind behind a voice like that. Not the officer who tackled doors. Not the medic told to lie. This was the person setting lanes, counting reactions, and calling human beings groups. Tarrant whispered, "That may be him." "Who?" "I never heard the full name. Only Breck. Someone from Advanced Doctrine." Below them, the medic stepped to Jalen's chair and checked a monitor. Jalen jerked against the restraint as if the floor under him had shifted. Nora understood enough to act. They were not just holding survivors. They were still testing them. Narrowing options. Stress sequence. Keep Vale in motion. The trap was not over because she escaped the ward. The escape had been folded into the same machine. She looked along the catwalk until she found the overhead cabling feeding the field lamps and chair systems. 2 exposed to reach from there and 2 loud to cut by hand. Then she saw the old projector housing above the chamber, still wired into the emergency power bus. If it fell, it would hit the lamp rack and throw the room into darkness. Tarrant read the direction of her eyes. That drop will bring security from every side. It will also stop whatever this stage is. He shut his eyes for one beat. You are not leaving. Nora answered without looking at him. No, that was the true turn inside her. Until that point, she had still been measuring exits, still telling herself survival came first because a dead witness proved nothing. But Jalen was in the chair because he had spoken in the ward. He had trusted the wrong room for 2 sentences, and now Saint Varda had him strapped to a test floor like a lab animal. If Nora walked away to save herself, then all the proof in her jacket would rot with her conscience. She moved to the projector housing bracket and began working the manual bolts loose with the terminal plate. Old fittings complained softly under the strain. Below, the chamber speaker came alive again. Candidate Bell has likely provided enough local insight. If recovered, isolate and transfer. If not, log collateral loss under weather instability. Taryn stared at the dark below as if he had just heard his own funeral spoken in office language. That was me. Nora tightened her grip on the plate. I heard. You were right about going deeper. His voice had gone thin but steady. Now, this is not a rogue security team. The final bolt gave. Nora braced the heavy projector casing with both hands, counted once, and shoved. The machine dropped like dead weight. It smashed through the lamp rack and burst in a storm of sparks. The chamber went black except for emergency strips along the floor. One guard shouted, the other turned toward the prisoners instead of the door, and the medic ducked. Jalen threw himself sideways with the chair, still partly pinned to him, and knocked into the restraint arm hard enough to snap one side loose. Nora was already moving. She ran the catwalk, dropped the access ladder 2 rungs at a time, and hit the floor near the rear wall just as one of the guards turned. He came toward her fast with a baton out, expecting a cornered cadet. Nora drove a loose lamp stand into his wrist, then into his knee, and took his control key before he hit the ground. Not elegant. Fast enough. The second guard reached for Jalen. Taryn, still on the ladder, hurled a metal toolbox down for the catwalk. It caught the guard across the shoulder and bought Nora the second she needed to close the distance and ram the first guard's baton into the locking cradle of Jalen's restraint chair. The field snapped off. Jalen fell forward hard, coughing. You took your time. Nora got an arm under him. I had to make an entrance. That was the second dry line she allowed herself, and only because Jalen was alive enough to hear it. And the chamber doors opened. Not more guards this time. A woman in dark range command colors stepped into the doorway between 2 security officers and took in the scene with one quick, furious glance. Nora knew her from Taryn's description before he whispered the name. Soha Kedem. Deputy Range Director Sarah Kelm looked from the broken projector to Nora, then to the loose restraint chair, and made a decision faster than the guards behind her. Drop your weapons, she told the officers. The men glanced at each other, confused, but obeyed. Kelm stepped inside alone. Vale, she said, if you stay here another 30 seconds, Breck gets what he wants. Nora did not lower the baton. He already got a storm lane full of cadets. Kelm's jaw tightened. Yes, and if you do not move. Now, he gets a clean end to the story too. She reached slowly into her jacket and held out a flat command tag. I tried to stall the West Sector escalation review. I lost. I also copied the authorization chain before they pushed me off local control. The final approval is not internal security. It goes through Director Halwenbreck in Advanced Response Doctrine with external transfer review stamped by the Meridian Procurement Board. That landed harder than Nora expected. A school program would have been one thing. Rotten, cruel, and local. This was bigger. Saint Varda was shaping disposable forward response units and selling the method upward, maybe outward, under the language of doctrine and procurement. Not one bad officer. A theory of war with buyers. Kelm took one step closer. Breck is feeding candidates into a doctrine pitch. He wants soldiers who can be thrown into impossible ground before regular forces commit. Minimal support. Maximal attrition tolerance. Politically cheap. Operationally deniable. Jalen looked sick. Taryn looked worse. Nora said, why tell me now? Because he crossed a line I thought command would not cross. Kelm's voice stayed controlled. but anger showed through now. And because he still needs live candidates for transfer. That gives us one leverage point before dawn. A speaker clicked somewhere above them. Breck's voice returned, colder this time. Deputy Director Kelm, step away from the candidates. Your authority is suspended. Kelm did not even glance up. He is in the observation suite above the old simulation ring, she said quickly. He has the central archive key and the transfer manifest. Without those, he can still lie. With them, he can be broken. The chamber lights shifted from red to white. That was worse. White meant general access was unlocking for a sweep. Kelm tossed the command tag to Nora. Take the east maintenance lift to the upper observation suite. I will pull security toward the lower ring. Jalen grabbed Nora's sleeve. If you go up there alone, you walk into his center. Nora looked at the command tag in her hand, then at the projection wall still glowing with survival bans and route failures. Her story had changed again in the span of one chamber. She was not only a mark survivor now. She was a witness to a doctrine, a live example of the method, and one of the few people left on campus who understood what the list actually meant. Breck wanted live candidates because they proved his theory. The Meridian Procurement Board wanted them because live proof sold better than dead speculation. Nora slid the command tag into her palm and made the decision. She was done trying to slip out through Saint Varda's cracks. She would get the archive key, pull the manifest, drag the truth into daylight, and take every candidate she could reach with her on the way out. Nora had the command tag, the drive from the old review office, and the name of the man who had turned Saint Varda into a sorting mill. That changed the shape of the night. She was no longer trying to slip through cracks and hope the storm hit her. She needed to pull the surviving candidates out, get the archive key and transfer manifest, and force the truth into a place Breck could not erase before dawn closed the transfer window. The east maintenance lift sat behind the old simulation ring, half hidden by dead projectors and service racks. Sarah Kelm pointed Nora toward it, then turned to the two security officers she had disarmed in the chamber. Get those restraints off the others, Kelm said. Then tell anyone below this rank that I ordered a containment reroute. If they hesitate, tell them Breck wants the lower ring sealed first. One of the officers stared at her. That is not true. Kelm's face stayed hard. No, but it sounds true enough to buy us 90 seconds. Jalen was on his feet now, though not cleanly. He leaned on the broken restraint frame for balance while Nora checked the chamber door. Taryn had made it down from the catwalk and looked close to folding, but he was still thinking clearly, which mattered more. We need simple, Nora said. No speeches. No guessing. Kelm, you pull security toward the lower ring and keep Breck looking down instead of up. Taryn, you know the relay layout and old service paths. You come with me until you cannot. Jalen, if you can still move, you help get the other candidates out of here and toward a public channel. What public channel? Jalen asked. The C Hall. Kelm looked at her sharply. That hall has been closed for ceremonial use for months. Not from central broadcast, Nora said. Saint Varda still uses it for founder addresses and command notices. If a message hits the C Hall feed, it rolls to every shelter point and every open instruction screen on campus. It is old, ugly, and impossible to bury fast. That was the piece Nora needed. The C Hall was not just another room deeper in the campus. It was the one chamber built to talk to everyone at once. If Breck lost control of that feed, every cadet, medic, and instructor still awake would see what he had been trying to move in the dark. Taryn rubbed a hand over his face. The upper observation suite will have the archive key, but the manifest probably mirrors to command storage. Then we pull both, Nora said. Jalen straightened, pain showing now, but not stopping him. And if Breck locks the hall before we get there? Nora slid the command tag into her palm. Then we make him lock it in public. That earned a short look from Kelm that came close to approval. Good, she said. Move. The east maintenance lift rose through the inside wall of the observation tower, and Nora used the climb to think like the people hunting her. Breck had lost control of the chamber below. He would correct by narrowing movement toward the upper suite, not broadening it. He would expect panic, speed, and obvious escape routes. So Nora chose the opposite. She stepped out on the service level 1 floor below the observation suite and led Taryn through a cold pipe corridor instead of taking the main glass stair. Rain beat the tower windows hard enough to blur the lights of the campus beyond. Down on the terraces, Saint Varda looked like a machine tightening against itself. Security shutters sealed one walkway while another opened. Bridge lights went dark, then came back red. Breck was still shaping traffic through the campus, which meant he still trusted the system more than the people inside it. That was the weakness Nora needed. At the end of the pipe corridor, a narrow service grill opened over the back of the observation suite. Nora crouched behind it and looked in. The suite had been built for instructors to watch simulation runs from a quiet, elevated room. Tonight, it looked more like a temporary command post. 2 wall screens showed live movement paths across the campus. Another displayed the West Sector evaluation chart. A fourth showed a dot clock counting down to dawn transfer alignment. One security captain stood at the central console, another watched the main door, and Howland Breck stood near the forward window with his hands clasped behind his back. Taryn leaned close to the grill. Archive key is on the command rail at the center desk. Manifest access will sit behind his print authorization. Nora watched the room for another 5 seconds. The captain by the rail did not wander. The one by the door checked the hall every 12 seconds. Breck never looked up because men like him rarely imagined danger would drop from the ceiling. She touched the emergency cutoff bundle running past the grill and then the old vent fan housing above it. This suite still has manual smoke purge. Taryn followed her eyes and understood. If you trigger it, the room goes into partial blind mode, and command screens switch to local backup. Short range only. He stared at her. That gives them less information, not us. Exactly. She waited for the captain by the door to check the hall again, then drove the command tag edge first into the vent housing control. Sparks snapped. The purge fans roared alive at once. Old dust blasted through the grill. The suite lights dimmed to amber. 3 wall screens went black and reloaded slower than Breck liked. The captain to rail cursed and turned. Nora kicked the grill out and dropped into the room. The first officer reached for her. She hit him with the metal grill frame, not to break him, just to tangle his arms long enough to take the archive rail from the console. The second officer rushed in from the door side, but Taryn slammed the fallen grill down across his shin from above as he jumped through after her. Breck moved for the rear exit instead of toward the fight. That told Nora what mattered most in the room. Not safety, control. She snatched the archive rail and slid the command tag across the manifest console before the first officer recovered. The screen unlocked into a transfer menu. Threshold candidate movement. Dokstaging. External review. Meridian procurement board. There was bigger and uglier than the theory. Breck had not only built the doctrine pitch. He had a transfer chain ready. Names, times, doc route, candidate condition bands. Nora caught the first lines and dumped the whole menu to the drive in her jacket. Breck stopped at the rear exit and looked back, his face finally stripped of its calm. You have no idea what you are interrupting. Nora kept one hand on the console. You are right. I thought this was a school. The officer by the rail lunged again. Nora trapped his wrist against the desk edge and shoved him into the dead screen wall. Taryn had no business being in a fight, but he knew the room better than the guards did. He slammed the auxiliary door control and cut Breck off from the rear exit. Breck's expression changed from anger to calculation in one clean step. Listen to me carefully. The people marked on that list were not chosen for punishment. They were identified for strategic response work. Work that will save ships and settlements regular forces cannot reach in time. That was how he sold it, Nora realized. Not cruelty, necessity. The disposable always entered the world dressed as the essential. He took one step toward her, palms empty. You have survived the exact pressures this program is meant to understand. You could help decide how it is shaped instead of letting frightened cadets and weak officers bury it. Nora looked at the manifest. Candidate condition bands, transfer readiness, attrition notes. He was talking about shaping the program while a clock on his wall counted down to shipping people through it. You already shaped it, she said. You just did it in the dark. Breck's voice stayed low and controlled. History is full of people who hated the first clean answer to an ugly problem. Nora pulled the drive free from the console port and backed toward the side door. Then you can explain your clean answer in public. She hit the side release. The door opened into the upper service hall. Go, she told Taryn. They ran. The upper service hall circled the observation tower and fed into the instructor bridge that crossed toward the C Hall complex. Nora had the archive rail and the manifest copy now, but Breck still had something stronger than evidence. He had active control of the campus. Unless she could put the proof in front of everyone at once, he could still call it theft, sabotage, or selective editing. Behind them, alarms changed tone. Not general containment anymore. Targeted pursuit. Breck's. Voice at the local speakers almost at once. All units. Vale has breached the upper suite and stolen restricted doctrine materials. Lock upper bridges. Recover bell. Candidate damage is no longer a priority. That told Nora two important things in one breath. First, Breck was rattled enough to name her directly. Second, his rules had changed. Candidates no longer needed to stay intact if the evidence was at risk. The hunt had just gotten rougher. Taryn heard it too and gave Nora a grim look. So much for your theory about needing us alive. They still need someone alive, Nora said. Just not everyone. The upper bridge ahead was starting to close. Thick shutter panels slid from the ceiling toward the floor in sections. Nora did not sprint for the center lane. She cut right through an instructor prep room and out onto the outer maintenance edge that ran beside the bridge glass. Wind toward her jacket as she climbed the narrow rail path. Taryn followed, slower now. Halfway across, security officers hit the main bridge from the far side and saw them through the glass. One pointed. Another changed direction toward the maintenance hatch ahead. They're learning, Taryn said. No, Nora said. They're adapting late. She dropped from the edge path onto a crossbeam junction below the bridge and forced open a storm access panel with the archive rail. The narrow shaft beyond led down into the C Hall support block. It was a miserable route, tight, wet, and steep, which was why Breck's people would not choose it first. Nora went down first. Taryn followed, but slower with every rung. At the bottom, they came out in a service room behind the C Hall sound deck. Old speaker housings lined the walls. A faded floor map still showed the hall layout. Main stage ahead, broadcast prep left, signal booth above. Nora pointed. Signal booth. Taryn caught the door frame instead of moving. His face had gone gray again. I can get you into the booth, but I'm not running much farther. Nora looked at him hard, taking the measure of what was left. He had gotten her through the relay truth, the observation suite, and the service descent. That had already cost him too much. You do not need to run, she said. You need to sit in the signal booth and keep the feed open. He gave a weak, humorless smile. That sounds almost restful. They reached the booth by the back stair. Through the wide interior glass, Nora could see the C Hall below. It had once been built as Saint Varda's ceremonial chamber, with a long stage facing rows of fixed seats and a giant projection wall behind it. Tonight, it was dark except for low aisle lights and the storm glow coming through the sea-facing windows. Taryn slid into the signal chair and lit the controls. Local feed is dead. Central lockout. Nora handed him the command tag. Use Kelm's rank and Breck's archive rail together. If the system argues, make it choose between old command and new doctrine. Taryn blinked once. That is not how systems are supposed to work. It is how bad systems fail. You want to work. The first lockout screen broke under the command tag. The second opened only halfway until Taryn slotted the archive rail beside it. Then the booth screens ballooned alive with more access than either item should have carried alone. Old command channels, instruction boards, shelter point displays, and public feed routing. Taryn stared at the screen. You were right. He built the doctrine layer on top of old campus command. He never cleaned the overlap because he wanted speed. That was the weakness in full. Breck had stacked a secret program over a public institution without rebuilding the bones underneath. Saint Varda's old command structure still believed the C Hall mattered. Nora could use that. She handed Taryn the drive. When I say now, put pushed the manifest, the West Sector response file, and the transfer clock together. No edits. What are you doing until then? Nora looked through the glass to the hall below. Doors on both sides were unlocking in sequence. Breck had understood the threat, and he was coming to crush it at the source. I'm keeping him visible. Nora across from the booth stared to the main stage entrance just as the first security team entered the hall. They came in low and fast through the side aisles, weapons up but still set for shock restraint. Breck had not entirely abandoned control. He still wanted the room quiet if he could get it. Nora stepped onto the stage where every old command camera could see her. The giant projection wall behind her remained dark. The hall itself felt enormous, built for official speeches, ceremony, and moral theater. Good. That was exactly why she wanted Breck in it. The lead officer raised a hand. Cadet Vale. Down on your knees. Nora did not move. A second set of doors opened at the back of the hall. Howland Breck entered flanked by more security, his coat wet from the bridge and anger now visible through the polish. You're done, he said. Nora spoke loudly enough for the room, the cameras, and the old microphones hidden in the stage rail. Then come say that where Saint Varda records it. He stopped halfway down the center aisle. The officers around him did not rush. He was still trying to measure whether speed or optics matter more. Nora held up the archive rail. This is your doctrine key. The manifest is already copied. The hall feed is one command away from live. So choose carefully. Breck's voice went colder. You think you can shame a system that exists because weak people want hard work done without hard decisions attached to it. There it is, Nora said. Say the rest. His jaw tightened. Around the hall, the officers shifted. Some still looked ready to rush the stage. Others were listening now, which was even better. The frontier is not held by speeches, Breck said. It is held by people willing to enter impossible ground first. Nora took one step toward the edge of the stage. People you sort in storms and ship out before dawn. Breck did not deny it fast enough. In the booth above, Taryn must have seen the opening because the projection wall behind Nora burst to life. West Sector response charts filled the screen. Then the transfer manifest. Then the dawn alignment clock. Then the line that killed the room. Disposable forward response units reduce political cost. The whole C hall went still. That was the moment Breck lost the dark. He turned toward the booth glass with real panic for the first time. Cut the feed. Too late. Taryn had not only put it on the C hall wall. He had kicked it across every shelter point, every instruction screen, and every open campus panel still tied to the old command net. Nora knew because half the officers on the floor glanced toward their wrist displays at the same time. Breck realized it too. So did the people under him. And because the room had seen it together, he could no longer hide behind phrasing, doctrine, or selective release. Whatever happened next would happen in the open. Nora tightened her grip on the archive rail and faced him squarely. Now the final fight could begin. The C hall screens were live, the evidence was out, and Breck had lost the dark. That did not mean he had lost the campus. Nora still had to keep the feed alive, hold the witnesses together, and stop any transfer from reaching the dock before dawn. If she failed at any one of those, Breck could still turn a public scandal into a controlled emergency and move his candidates out under a different label. He stood in the center aisle of the C hall with security on both sides and the storm at his back through the high glass. The giant wall behind Nora still showed the West Sector response chart, the transfer list, and a line about disposable forward response units. Around the room, officers kept glancing at their wrist displays, caught between the command in front of them and the evidence already moving through the campus behind them. Breck did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Lock the hall, he said. Hold the booth. Recover the archive rail. That was all. No outrage and no denial. Just control. Half the officers moved at once. The other half hesitated. Nora saw the split and understood what it meant. Breck still had loyal people, but he no longer had clean obedience. The C hall had become exactly what she wanted it to become, a place where every next move would be seen, measured, and remembered. She backed toward the stage stairs without taking her eyes off him. Taryn, she shouted toward the booth glass. What else can the hall do? His answer came through the stage speaker, thin but clear. More than broadcast. If I push it into incident record mode, the hall stamps everything as an official live archive. Once that seal is active, no candidate transfer can legally clear the dock without command and chief medical sign-off. That is how the old campus was built. That was the backbone of the fight now, and Nora held on to it once. Incident record mode was not magic. It was a built-in chain of custody. Once the Sea Hall declared a live official event, every movement tied to that event had to be logged under the old command structure. Breck could bend a secret program. He could not quietly ship people out under a formal record the whole school had just seen. Breck heard it too. His face hardened. "Take the booth now," he said. 3 officers broke for the upper stairs. Nora moved first. She leaped off the stage and drove her shoulder into the lead officer before he could hit the stair rail. The impact knocked them both sideways. He was bigger, armored, and ready for force. She was faster, angrier, and knew she only needed a second. She smashed the archive rail into his wrist hard enough to make him drop his restraint launcher, then kicked it under the front row seats. The second officer came around him. Jalen hit that one from the side with a loose chair bracket torn from the Sea Hall aisle. Not elegant. Enough. Breck did not flinch. He pivoted instead and spoke into his collar microphone. Iniziate doc contingency. Move all identified candidates under storm emergency authority. Full escort. No further delay. Nora's stomach tightened. There it was. His final play. If he could not keep the program hidden, he would strip it bare of ceremony and ram it through the dock before anyone on campus could get organized enough to stop him. He was willing to burn the school's face to save the doctrine underneath. "Taryn," Nora called, still fighting for the stairs. "Seal the record now." Trying. The third officer had already reached the landing. Nora saw him raising a shock baton toward the booth door when a figure stepped into the upper stair from the opposite side. Dr. Elian Marr. She still wore medical gray, but now she had a field injector in one hand and no patience left in her face. She drove the injector into the officer's neck seal before he could turn. He collapsed against the rail, stunned more by surprise than pain. Dr. Marr looked down at Nora. "You started a loud night." Nora shoved the first officer off her and started up the stairs. "You locked me into it." "Fair." Behind them, Breck's loyal captain was already pushing officers toward the stage exits. The man finally stopped pretending to be careful. "Move," he barked. "Recover the candidates in lower hold. And clear the dock approach." Nora heard that and changed priorities on the spot. The booth mattered. The dock mattered more. She reached the landing where Dr. Marr stood and looked through the booth glass. Taryn had 2 screens open and blood on his sleeve now, probably from the climb and the strain more than any new wound. He did not look away from the controls. "Can you lock the record?" Nora asked. "Yes." "Can I hold it alone if they cut the tower power?" "No." Dr. Marr stepped past Nora to the booth door. "Then he will not be alone." Nora looked at her. "Can you sign medical hold?" Dr. Marr already understood. If the incident record goes active, yes. It will flag every candidate under contested condition. Dot transfer stops unless command and medical both confirm. Breck could bully command. He could not fake a chief medical clearance with the whole campus staring at live evidence. That was the other half of the trap closing on him. "Do it," Nora said. She turned to Jalen. "With me?" He nodded once. No speeches. No hero talk. Just movement. They ran for the lower service stairs because the dock contingency would move through the freight transfer line under the Sea Hall, not across the open terraces. That was the shortest protected route from the old simulation ring to the harbor lifts. Breck had chosen it because it was fast, enclosed, and easy to lock behind convoy. Nora chose it for the same reason. If that line jammed in public, his last clean path out would die with it. The freight transfer line started beneath the Sea Hall in a concrete tunnel wide enough for cargo skids and small transport sleds. Emergency lights painted the walls in pale bands, and a storm siren rolled overhead in slow waves as Nora and Jalen reached the service platform above the line and looked down. 3 transport sleds were already there. 2 carried restrained candidates from the old simulation ring. The third carried equipment crates and 2 internal security officers guarding the rear. At the front stood Breck's captain, barking orders into a headset while dock shutters farther down the line opened in sequence. Breck had moved faster than he needed to because he knew the same thing Nora did. Once the incident record sealed and the medical hold hit, the dock would stop being a door and become evidence. Jalen crouched beside her at the service rail. How many? Too many for a straight hit. He looked down the tunnel. What is the weak part? Nora studied the convoy instead of the people. Standard escort shape. Front captain, rear guard, candidates in the middle. No heavy suppressive fire because they still needed bodies alive and presentable. Most important of all, the sleds were magnet-guided. They followed line control in sequence. If the lead stalled, the rest stacked behind it. The captain thinks speed protects him, Nora said. So we take speed. She spotted the manual line box mounted halfway down the platform. Old hardware again. A red handle sat behind a clear cover. Freight line emergency brake. Used when a load slipped or a worker fell. Jalen followed her eyes. That will lock the whole track. For 40 seconds maybe. Long enough. Then what? Nora looked at the candidate sleds again. Then we make the guards choose between the line and the list. They moved at once. Jalen circled left along the upper platform toward the line box. Nora took the steel stairs down toward the rear of the convoy. She did not hide once she committed. There was no point. Surprise had to land before the captain could process it. She jumped the last 6 feet onto the equipment sled and drove into the rear guard before he turned. The force knocked him against the crate frame. She tore his headset free and threw it down the tunnel. The second rear officer drew a launcher, but Nora slammed the crate door into his arm and sent the shot wild into the concrete wall. Blue sparks burst across the tunnel. The captain spun at the front and shouted, "Move the line. Move it now." Jalen yanked the emergency handle. The freight track screamed. Every sled locked in place, so hard the whole convoy jolted. One of the candidate restraints snapped loose on the middle sled and sent its occupant sideways into the rail. The captain swore and ran back toward the stalled line. That was the choice Nora wanted. Guard the people or guard the movement. She reached the middle sled and hit the restraint release for the nearest candidate. A Carthy cadet she had seen only in passing blinked up at her, dazed but awake. "Can you stand?" "Yes." "Then pull. The one next to you and go up that stair." He did not ask questions. "Good." The rear officer came at her again with the launcher now gripped like a club. Nora ducked the first swing and drove her elbow into his chest. Jalen, still above on the platform, threw the broken emergency handle levered down into the man's shoulder and sent him to one knee. The captain drew a sidearm then, no longer aiming to preserve condition so carefully. That was Breck's influence reaching him. The public story had failed. Now he was trying to save the shipment. He pointed the weapon at Jalen on the platform. "Back away or I drop him." Nora froze just long enough to read the truth of it. The captain did not need to hurt Jalen badly. He only needed Nora to stop for 5 seconds while the line reset. Then a new voice hit the tunnel speakers overhead. "Freight line under medical hold. Transfer is denied. Dr. Marr." A second voice followed on another speaker, campus-wide and impossible to mistake. "Incident record seal is active. Unauthorized candidate movement will be logged as unlawful extraction." "Taryn." The captain looked up. That single reflex cost him. Nora closed the distance, struck his weapon wrist against the sled rail, and drove him backward into the front control box. The sidearm skidded away. He swung on instinct, heavy and trained. She gave ground once, twice, then pulled him into the exact weakness the whole system had been built around. He did not dare use the full force he wanted because the candidates were right behind her. He had been ordered for hours to preserve condition, preserve bodies, preserve transport value. Even when Breck changed the rules, the habit remained. He checked himself for the line, for the cargo, and for the witnesses. Nora did not. She hit the front line control with a command tag and forced the convoy into full local shutdown. The freight shutters ahead slammed closed. The track power died. Warning lights turned white to indicate command dispute. All movement stopped. The captain stared at the dead controls, then at the candidates climbing free, Then at the line he could no longer move. "You have no authority," he said. Nora looked at the flashing dispute warning and then at him. "Neither do you now." The Carthy cadet reached the upper stair with the second candidate. Jalen, shaking but still upright, dragged them the rest of the way. More footsteps sounded at the far end of the tunnel, but not all of them were internal security. Some were cadets. Some were instructors. Once the record seal went live, the campus had started choosing sides out loud. The captain heard them too. His face changed. He was not beaten because Nora had knocked him down. He was beaten because time had left him. He backed away from the dead control box. Nora did not chase him. She had what mattered. The line was stopped. The candidates were out. The transfer window had broken in public view. Above them, the tunnel screens switched to campus emergency format. The C Hall evidence rolled again. Then came a new image. Halwyn Breck, still in the hall, still trying to command a room that had stopped treating him like command. Kelm had kept him visible after all. By the time Nora and Jalen got the freed candidates back to the C Hall support block, the final break had already begun. Breck stood on the C Hall floor under the giant screen while officers, instructors, medics, and shaken cadets gathered in the aisles and at the side doors. Nobody had invited them. They had simply come because once the feed went live and the transfer line stopped, the whole campus understood the same thing. This was no longer a closed command problem. It was Saint Varda judging itself in real time. Kelm stood near the front row with two officers at her side. Not bodyguards. Witnesses. Breck still tried one last line of defense. "You are all reacting to an incomplete operational doctrine review." Dr. Marr came down from the booth stair and cut through him before he could rebuild momentum. "You moved restrained cadets under medical dispute toward a dock without clearance. That is not doctrine review. That is unlawful transfer." Taryn's voice followed from the booth, weaker now but steady. "The relay chain, the threshold sort files, and the transfer manifest are all in the record." Breck turned in place, looking for one face to command. He found none. That was the final exposure of his weakness. He had built the whole program on systems, tags, routes, and people who obeyed because the structure stayed clean. Once the structure became public and dirty at the same time, he had no language left except necessity. And necessity sounded very small with the evidence wall burning behind him. He looked at Nora one last time. "You think this ends because one school recoils? The frontier will still ask for what I built." Nora answered from the aisle, not the stage. "Maybe, but tonight it does not get to ask in secret." That was enough. Kelm stepped forward. "Halwyn Breck, you are relieved pending formal custody review." The captain from the freight line was brought in a minute later by two instructors and did not fight. He looked old now, not weak, used up. No one applauded. No one made a speech. Saint Varda was too tired and too ashamed for either. The program broke the same way rotten metal breaks, not in one clean snap, but in a series of ugly failures all at once. The transfer line was sealed under disputed authority. The candidate list was frozen under medical hold. The archive rail was copied into public incident record. The officers who had spent the night hunting survivors were disarmed, separated, or simply stopped by the fact that too many people were now watching. For the first time since Nora woke in the recovery ward, the building itself seemed to stop hunting. Hours later, after the storm had started to thin and the first gray of morning touched the water beyond the medical arm, Nora found herself back where the night had begun. The recovery ward still hung over the Black Sea, but it felt like a different place now. The doors opened because people were injured, not because lists needed sorting. The medics moved fast and spoke plainly. Nobody tried to block the lockers. Nobody offered a cup to keep someone quiet. Dr. Marr stitched a split at Nora's brow and checked her ribs with the same scan wand as before. This time, Marr said, "The answer is simple." Bruised, exhausted, and still annoyingly upright. Nora sat on the edge of the bed and almost smiled. "That sounds more honest." "It is." Across the ward, Jalen slept with one arm in a sling and a monitor on his wrist. Taryn sat propped up in the next bay, pale but alive, arguing weakly with a medic about staying awake long enough to file a relay statement before breakfast. Kelm had already been pulled into 3 separate command reviews, and looked like she would rather walk back into the storm than sit through any of them. Saint Varda would spend weeks sorting what had happened. Reviews, custody, testimony. The Meridian Procurement Board would deny things before it admitted anything. Advanced Response Doctrine would shed names, papers, and maybe a few careers to survive the blast. Nora let those thoughts pass without holding them for long. What mattered in that room was smaller and harder to fake. The candidates were still on campus. The transfer did not leave the dock, and the record now existed in too many places to kill cleanly. She stood and walked to the window at the end of the ward. Below her, the sea hit the pylons in slow gray bands. Beyond the harbor wall, a shuttle sat idle on its pad under armed guard. Its dawn departure canceled before it ever cleared the water. She had saved enough to matter. She had not saved everything. Some names from West Sector would still never answer roll call again. Some officers would claim they did not know enough. Some people far above Breck would already be shaping cleaner language for the same ugly need. None of that changed the simple truth of the morning. Saint Varda had tried to turn survival into inventory, and for one night at least, it had failed. A soft chime sounded from a wall console behind her. Not an alarm, just an incoming notice. Dr. Marr glanced at it and frowned. That was fast. What? Nora asked. Marr read the first line and then looked over at her. An inquiry vessel from outside Council Training Command just requested priority docking review. No transfer authority. No weapons declaration. Just one line of purpose. Nora turned from the window. Marr read it aloud. Independent Storm Rescue Audit. Nora looked back toward the harbor where the gray light was spreading over the water. The night at Saint Varda was over. The next problem had not arrived yet, but was already on its way. The storm over Orris had finally begun to ease, but what Saint Varda had exposed that night would not ease with it. Some wounds would close. Some names would be cleared, and some truths, once dragged into the light, would not go quietly back into the dark. Nora Vale did not win because the world suddenly became fair. She won because, when a system tried to turn survival into something cold and disposable, she refused to let it decide what a human life was worth. And sometimes, in a place built on control, that refusal is enough to break the machine. If this story stayed with you, if it made you think, or if you want more science fiction where courage means choosing to fight back when the cost is real, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. It truly helps more people find these stories, and it helps this channel keep bringing you new worlds, new battles, and new voices worth remembering. Thank you for listening. And when you're ready, the next story will be waiting.